For this function, to this event, on behalf of the organizers and initiators of the legislative initiative, we would like to convey our utmost gratitude that on the eve of the holidays you came to participate in this roundtable dedicated to very important socially significant draft law, which is very interesting from the point of view of the public at large and the professional community, both within the framework of computer technologies and the, let's say, the managerial community, the project which actually has a direct connection with the interests of the state. I'm really happy that today is attended by, well, by very interesting people who have the professional attitude towards the above-mentioned sphere, the public management, computer technologies, legal issues, etc. And we do hope that we are going to have very open and principled discussion of all the problematic or outstanding issues, because this is our goal, to try and reach consensus within the framework of this draft law to make it the most useful and correct, which will bring benefits to the society and the state, and once again to demonstrate the gradual but absolutely adequate and comprehensible striving Ukraine to become part of the European community by perceiving all those and adopting all those structures and rules and regulations which exist there. First of all, I would like to give the floor to the Deputy Head of the Presidential Administration on the economic and other reforms, Dmytro Shymkiv, who is going to tell you in general terms about, first of all, about the initiative pursued by the state, to which degree those initiatives can be coordinated with this draft law. Thank you very much for your attention shown to the discussion around the cloud technologies and how Ukraine actually tries to move towards the modern world using the modern technologies. Today in Europe, they are working on the digital agenda 2020, and at the same time in Ukraine, as a result of the lengthy discussion, including the discussion with the President of Ukraine, we decided, upon the approval of the 2020 strategy, to initiate, to come up with an initiative which would unite different draft laws or transformations and changes which Ukrainian society badly needs under such a name, and digital Ukraine. What digital Ukraine means, in general speaking, what are the issues which we are discussing within the concept of the digital Ukraine concept? I mean, some of the trends and directions regarding which we already have adopted the draft laws about the open data, which actually force the public agencies and the governmental agencies to publish the data from different registers in the open format, in electronic format, which makes it possible to be processed by the modern analytical systems, electronic messages, electronic petitions. Again, this is the direction which makes it possible for the governmental bodies to interact, and also to the people to interact with the governmental structures using electronic communication means, whatever pertains to the electronic signature, electronic systems of interaction. But we are talking about the service level, which we are going to talk about even more in the nearest future. Again, without theorizing, but we are talking about what those systems must look like and how they are going to be introduced. Next level is the infrastructural one. And here we're talking about the cloud computing, cloud technology, something where the world is moving towards. The majority of the global the countries in the world to use the digital technologies. Later on, I'll give you specific examples, and also the comprehensive protection information issue. Unfortunately, these issues, whatever we have here, is outdated and obsolete. And a bit of statistics communicating today, or speaking in the Ministry of Education, the majority of the high schools and higher schools do not use the modern technology, because when they read the methodological book on the comprehensive protection of information, I don't know what kind of tempo of development of modern technology it was planned to be used in. Maybe it's targeted for the for Russia or even Soviet Union just to ban this kind of technology so that nobody can use this technology. When nobody uses any technology, this ideal situation according to the standards and norms which today dominate in the public segment, in the state-run segment. At the same time, if you have a look at the developers in Ukraine or the Ukrainian companies, all of them use today modern technologies and further develop those. We actually hit the top 10 in the world as regards the developments or the place where the world leaders plan to take care of their developments or where the modern technologies emerge. So why Ukraine has to lag behind or live in the society which has been invented or thought of 100 times of Brezhnev, even Stalin? Why should not we use the modern technologies which we ourselves create for other countries to use? You'll be surprised, but many cloud technologies, even development cloud technologies, are taken care of by Ukrainian engineers and developers and based on the Ukrainian algorithm system. So coming to the, switching to the topic of the cloud technologies before Valeriy will take over, very briefly, cloud technologies, number one, it's a saving of the budget savings. Next slide. Next slide. Number one. First, we are talking about the minimizing the budget expenditures. Many structures do not have any funds, just do not have any, or they exist in such an amount that I don't know. Maybe to replace the cartridge, this money will suffice, but maybe not. At the same time, using the cloud technologies, you can today very quickly launch any kind of website, any kind of instrument or tool for data collection. It is used today, but not legally. Many organizations today make use of Google Doors just to collect information, to gather information. Public organizations do that. Many people use today Twitter or Facebook. Somebody uses Amazon, somebody Microsoft. Still another will use different technologies. And data centers have been created in Ukraine, but this is an example of cloud technologies, but not possessed by the global leaders, but Ukrainian leaders. So this procedure of using those technologies is much complicated today. Cloud technologies ensure considerable saving in budget because you pay only for what you use, and sometimes this is a free service. In order to realize this service function for gathering or processing data, it doesn't need any money. We can use a very complex, comprehensive technology. We are talking about the cloud technology. I myself use machine learning or something like that. And today in the presidential administration, we are trying to launch the special center, which allows us to see some regularities in the economic plane. In general speaking, about the increase of efficiency of management, another example. We are talking today, for example, about the swift increase of the resources to register the IDPs, internally displaced persons, to provide protection and comprehensive protection of information. This will take several years, but many issues can be resolved within several days. When I was working in Microsoft, it took us about 10 days to register the entries to the international higher schools or colleges, universities, and neither of the structure will tolerate that. But those personal data were preserved or kept in the Ministry of Education. This is important because those are the real true-to-life examples. Take some global examples. There are aplenty. There are many countries who lead the way in using cloud technologies. Great Britain, France, Spain, they all have the government club within the country. But what is interesting, they use the commercial capabilities inside the country. The majority of the countries do not use the public budget funds. I may tell you, several years I've been observing how we invest and use the money to create, well, Actually, each minister department believes that they have to create their own data center, without having understanding how much it's going to cost. I mean, the construction, providing security and the operation, etc., etc. Very seldom they make those calculations. If you take the example of Singapore, they use the commercial data center for to preserve, to keep the public-related data, and they may interact even with investments. And there are a lot of examples like that. Even Turkey would like to create the regional hub for data center. Why not in Ukraine? Why shouldn't we build those data centers in Ukraine, which can be used both by the state and the commercial structures? Why can't use the global platforms or hubs in order to launch some other issues? Among those countries which launch or introduce cloud technology, we can see Italy, Moldova, Belgium, Denmark. For example, Danish municipalities use Google Labs for their work. In the high school and municipalities, Great Britain, generally speaking, the whole infrastructure processing of data, the government clouds, is Microsoft Azure. For example, the Danish people, they create this structural service involving the local providers and create so-called cloud.dk. Those are real, true-to-life examples how this can operate, how this can work both in Europe and the world over. This is in what direction we should move. The idea of this draft law is, very briefly, to give a chance to those public bodies which want to use this, to give them the right to use this. That's it. Because today there are some bodies or agencies which do not watch us and they do not want to use electronic, let's say, procurement or whatever else. Everything seems to be very good with them. But there are ministers' departments who would like to move, let's say, promptly and to reach this situation which will allow them to resolve the available situations. And this is our major goal and the initiative around this kind of cloud technology. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dmitry. We start to reach the understanding what we have to discuss now, taking consideration that here we have not only representatives of technological companies, also journalists and the legal officers and the public figures. I believe it would be very interesting to listen to those people who are in love with their profession, what is really cloud technology, what they are all about, and how we can resolve those problems which were mentioned by Dmitry, because this is really very important from the point of view when we are talking about public sector. We have to understand and realize that we can do something in public sector only what is allowed or permitted. So if we would like to switch over to some innovation technologies, we have to introduce that in some legislative field or space, and we have to understand what is that. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Valeriy Fishchuk, who not only represents here one of the largest manufacturers here, but also just not to make an Innovation Development of Ukraine Association. So in this situation, this is something which we really need.
Thank you very much. I would like to say that we are doomed for innovations. Let's think how. Cloud technologies, we live with them more than 100 years. If you look at this room, and you see lights, that's electricity, that is cloud technology. We just got used to that we don't notice. That we have this cloud for long. This is a service, and this organization which provides electricity for us. It buys electric energy as a service. Don't you think that somewhere underground there is a power station that burns, uses diesel and produces this? No, this is a municipal service, not only. Why do I say that? This technology, cloud technology, this centralized production and distribution of electric energy made the revolution once in the industrial world. We got used to that. We use that every day, and we don't think about that. We just switch on the lights, and that's it. and it works. How did it start? How did that develop? How do I want to connect that to cloud technologies in the 19th century? Every enterprise produced electric energy to itself. You know how difficult that was, expenditures, etc. Cost for hot. And then Mr. Edison, a scientist who invented what a law, he suggested to them to build a power station, but one. In that case, those producers, what they were supposed to do? To get, in fact, cable and to connect the equipment for that to work. What did Edison create? He created the first public cloud. That power station, there was a pool of energy or pool energy resources using their language. This language, it's a cloud of information resource, but there were some businessmen, entrepreneurs at that time who told, look, we would like to have our own power plant because there is a technology. Please build your own. Build your own power plant that serves one or several enterprises, not public enterprise. Not everyone can come and ask for that. That pool, energy pool, they called it private. Private energy pool, private energy system, or in our language, private cloud. And there was the third group of entrepreneurs who told, we have such a production that we built it, but there are peak users, and we need it's better to take from that public pool. Can we agree that we use our own, but when we need more, we'll take electricity from there? And one more cloud technology was born in the language of IT people, hybrid cloud, when you can use your own cloud and you can use the cloud, the public cloud. How do I want to connect it with this day, with the present, with the topic of IT? Just imagine that a power plant and that electricity, that is information infrastructure. Because every enterprise, in addition to consuming electricity, and there is no electric power, and there is no problem, people receive it as a service. And when they need information IT, they have a database service. Every ministry has that. By the way, every ministry has those technologies. When we speak about cloud technologies, that's the idea. Why not? Why not to make it to get information, to get IT infrastructure as a service, as a utility. A utility is like a municipal service. As a service, that's the most important. It's a key word in cloud technology. That's a service. When we get a service, and for us it's profitable, and our expenditures to buy, to purchase, and to own are not involved, we save money. As to a couple of words about a cloud. Why such allegory? Why such what they call it a cloud? When the IT people were drawing the charts, the databases as a cloud, and they put it also in the internet. That's a pool of information resources and opportunities, a pool of intellect, a pool of services, internet, which we use, all of us. We can call it a cloud. And how it was called before. They would depict it like state sector, public sector of Ukraine. Look, what Dmytro noted, they have a dilemma. They need to save because there is no money, and also on the other hand, they have to develop their own activity to achieve goals to reform the country. All of that requires lots of IT resources and intellectual resources. The question is how to make it that both are done at the same time. Or is there technology which can resolve the dilemma? Yes, people, cloud technologies. They were created to give a chance to save, to give new opportunities to people. I beg your pardon, quicker, cheaper to achieve results. This is what we need, our state public sector needs, definitely. And the third point, what are cloud technologies and the importance for the public sector? This public sector is apologete of using innovations. If it is innovative, as it could be, other sectors between people and education, any They can. They will be use. They will use those technologies. Somebody has to start to work transparently, openly, and to save and to achieve goals for the state. And finally, let's think about a cloud for the country. When they speak about a cloud for the country, cloud means big resources, intellect, and that is somewhere by someone developed, and there are different applications, and somebody's put on them. And we as a country, as people who can use them. That is intellect, and we speak about input of intellect to the country. That is means of production. That it has influence on the efficiency of every person, and that it influences on the efficiency of public center countries, and it influences on our economy. That we will quicker and with better quality and cheaper will achieve our own goals. I advise you to read a book, which is called The Big Switch. And it speaks about cloud technologies and how Edison understood that, and revolutions that they got, and we use them. We don't think them about as a cloud. So now it's about IT, and it's time for a revolution there. And we need to save and we need to build our country. Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe that it's time to listen to the third important voice in discussion this initiative, the voice which belongs to the representative of an NGO. I speak about Denis Gurskyi, representative and explainer and head of the NGO SocialBoost, and enthusiast of introduction, putting Britain cloud technology to social field. It's very important because we are trying to find synergy to develop that approach that could become a base for this legislative initiative. Denise, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Today I wanted to mention the importance of cloud technologies and different projects. It seems to me that the issue should not be a question whether we should use it or not, because it's an evolutionary normal next era we were supposed to enter. We were told that there would be opposition people who are in opposition to cloud technology. I would like to hear their comments why these technologies have no right to live. But let's discuss why cloud technologies are related to open standards and how all of that is moving. There is such a thing as government 2.0. There's government which we don't have yet, but which exists in the head of many people who came to public offices. It seems to me that the main task of the new government will be to give a chance to people not only to get services and to express their protest on the streets when the services work not the way they want, but to participate in the development of these services. If the state is such as a machine with mineral water, that a person starts shaking it when something goes wrong. And it's not quite correct. People don't do that in modern countries. People can participate in the development of state public services. They can express their opinion and directly participate in, etc. At present in Ukraine, there are a lot of programmers, and all of them, they would like to participate in this, like as volunteers, like public servants, and it's not necessarily about IT, because there are a lot of IT who work in the government, and they work not only on IT issues. And the most important is to create a bridge, to build a bridge that unites public, people, society, that would like to develop a service, and also state apparatus, which is very complicated and is not clear for the majority of people. Participation is the main task for our government, as I believe. Although people develop mobile applications or websites, and they believe will solve their everyday problems. But in fact, the state must launch such services, and just using the push from the society, or IT potential of the society, then those services are much better. There is also open data, which plays a very important role. Information, which produced by the state every day, is very important. Information about the state of roads, healthcare, education, energy, environment, etc. And data is used to build services on that, based on that. In our state, that will be the next step. Very often, there are services that produce the data for the state. For a state, a mobile application, for example, which collects information about shells in Donbass and registers data which can be used, for example, to coordinate subcontractors and for innovation in Donbass. A lot of people participate in this process. The only thing they need is just attention of the state to the topic, and also the state should take care of such sources. The same is about bad quality roads, etc. For such services to be processed, we need to have that link that unites civil society or IT activists, it doesn't matter how you call them, all more or less understand IT. And Ukraine is a leader, in fact, among IT outsourcing in the country. We belong to top 5 of the world. And the hypothesis is that with the background of how very complicated e-government is developed, we can use open data to develop new services. As abroad, such services are created by third organizations like NGOs or IT companies, and they use API that unites them with the state database, and they use that data and they develop added value. Everything starts usually with small projects, and now there are a lot of such small projects we have to grow in the country. This is an example how the founder of Twitter, how he imagined his service during the first days of Twitter. There was a portal created of open data, thanks to Microsoft and the Renaissance Foundation. They supported that initiative a year ago. And in 2015, the administration of the president made everything for the law on open data to be adopted. In addition to that portal, there is a very simple logic. You create a mobile or web edition. It works with the state data, and the system exists. Such systems allow to create services about security, for example, training schools, and choosing the best school for each child, or transportation applications that allow to drive around the city comfortably. In addition, all these services they don't put a threat on, they don't threaten security of such data that is we have in the state, because the state is responsible for data, and the third party is responsible for this, the security of services. Commercial, public organization, business or individual actors, doesn't matter. The main information is in the state. Examples. It's not our invention. The systems exist for long. For example, data.gov, and there are other topics for which they have applications, and you can find them, and you can find sources you're interested in that are developed by third parties. Also, there are local sites. The system becomes developed. For such systems, cities move to such, like Washington, D.C. has a lot of memorable applications, and about one city, local, and they use some local set of data. All these services, as a British portal of open data, all that exists in the cloud, because the burden is just huge on such structures. That's a big database, and very big. And when I say data because big data, something awful is happening. I can tell you that on the second day after they launched the portal in Ukraine, because there was just the demo data. The service we bought, and it's a dedicated normal server, it just died. Because of the support of Microsoft, we started to use the cloud, and everything is fine. Questions we have to ask about cloud technologies. They are not about whether we need to allow the state bodies to use cloud technologies or not. Questions we have to ask about how, for example, interoperability can be between several clouds, if there is such, or how one service complicated how to divide between several clouds. Is it possible? And those applications that connected to a cloud, how can they be taken out painlessly? Vendors on Ukraine market, how they can guarantee that without painlessly we can move from one vendor to the other, independently on the market situation. All these issues we have to discuss. I believe that cloud technology is a decisive step forward, and they will allow not only the state to operate with data and to involve ID companies, activists, organizations to develop new services, but also they will allow to improve cooperation between inside of the country, between public bodies. And thank you very much, Denise. As I understand that we listen to very important things for future draft laws. We understand that we need that for the law. There's a technical opportunity. We know that the society needs that. Now we have a more complicated task: how to realize that.
Отметила ранее, речь идет о том, что государственные органы могут осуществлять свою деятельность в рамках.
And how that can match what is done in the law. And now there is one more question: how to save, how to protect, how during the aggression that forces us to treat some things more seriously and than we did before. And also there is a need to develop. We have to solve all these issues sooner or later. There is no, we cannot postpone it anymore. It's time when changes must take place. Otherwise, expectation of changes turns into a reverse, into regress, not into development. And that's why I would like to hear about initiators of this law. What are the basic principles in the legislation? How this wish of the society to use this technology within the state? Will it be convenient for public bodies to use that? How safe it is from the point of view of international that will be there saved? How they will do that practically? I would like to give the floor for the discussion around this law. We would like to hear that, and then we could start a broader discussion. And those who signed the registration and who are sitting here, I think it will be smart. Maria Hornostai, an advisor for the administration of the president, and who is responsible for the development of this draft law. The floor is yours. Thank you, Tetiana. I'm thankful to the colleagues and the presenters who spoke before me, because they covered the goal of this draft law and what we're trying to achieve in this draft law. Then we'll have a detailed presentation of the text of the draft law, and before we move to that, I want to mention three things. First, we began a discussion about around this draft law several weeks ago, and the draft law was on the website Reforms in UA. and which I hope that you keep a track of all initiatives of the administration of the President around reforms. And we have lots of feedback and proposals to the draft law, and we are very thankful for that, and we take them into consideration. Secondly, those issues that you raise and we will discuss here that were in feedback, those issues are not new, and all the world was facing them, and Dmytro mentioned that. The issue of data protection and which data to place on the cloud and strategic is all the countries had to answer those questions. Those who use cloud technologies, and we don't invent anything new. We just use the best world experience to make a very good movement forward. And thirdly, everything which is discussed here, all the feedbacks and proposals that will be taken into consideration. You can watch the project on Reforms in UAE website, and if you wanted to give written proposals, that's a part of our work. Thank you, Maria. Now for the presentation of the draft law, I would like to give the floor to Dmitry, please. I would like to once again. I spoke in general. Now, very briefly, I would like to mention countries and what countries do in European community. That would be interesting. Just examples, because sometimes in corridors I hear behind the back that we lobby Microsoft. I will just name countries and services they use and for what, and for us to have complete transparency. Because at present, for example, the resource of that procurements. They use Amazon as a resource. It doesn't matter because there are leaders, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft on cloud technologies, but also there are cloud technologies resource. If we look at the Ukrainian provider infrastructure of this de novo, those who were there and who pass the level of security, they will kill you. Then they will give you, sooner than they will give you access to the data. That's one of the best level of security. If we look at infrastructure process data centers that belong to world leaders, as the one who works for that, all those companies, they have independent military units that are responsible for guarding the facility. Nobody has access, and those who visit it as a tour, they can confirm that. The same in Ukrainian companies that introduce that in Ukraine, introduce cloud technologies in Ukraine. That's very important because there is no lobbying. I would like to finish with that question. This technology and a choice of one or the other comes from cost, quality, standards, and certification. That's the most important. All the rest there should be competition between providers. Now, briefly about statistics. I will just read some facts. Denmark. Municipalities use Google Apps and services for schools since 2011. All procurements are on the cloud since 2011. Agency the user for the open data Denmark agency to protect data decided on use from Microsoft and Google that meet legislation, comply with the legislation. Infrastructure service provider, Cloud DK, is recognized as such that meets, complies with legislation. Greece. They use local companies for infrastructure services, so they don't build any states data centers. Norway. They reduce their standards and for cloud technologies. Municipal network uses Google Apps. Municipal Muse uses Microsoft Office. All these both they approved by security body, state security bodies. They certify global services. That's important. That cannot be done until we adopt the law. Sweden, the body to inspect data, they published directives on how to use cloud technologies that allow to use cloud technologies. Australia ordered cloud services from public big companies of 4.7 million in 2014, and also 4.5 million for this. They use the data centers that are in Australia. Security of courts, they started to use cloud technology since 2009. State procurements are completely, public procurements are completely in the cloud, and have such examples from Russia, Romania, Poland, Kosovo, Slovakia, Estonia, Slovenia. And for every country there is a story. Once Mexico, they switched all the system of surveillance of electronic invoices or accounts to get rid of the problem with VAT. There was a decision of Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. They put that on the cloud, and they saved $200 million because that's how it would cost if you wanted to build a data collection center. And this is the way the world develops, and did it in 4 months. And it doesn't matter who provider is. It's the most important. The technology is accessible for state bodies, for public bodies. Thank you. Irina Kalita, representative from the working group of experts who are working on the draft law, director of Department of International Audit Company Ernst & Young. You have the floor to present the draft law. Good afternoon. If to move to legal under to a plain legal basis of ideas in the draft law. If to look at the state of information law in Ukraine, the law of legislation we have, we'll see that now we have a number of laws that are not consequent, and as to types of information, use on information. As a result, we see the situation we have on the market, that there is a notion of secret information limited access, and also there is a confusion of what is open information, what is public information. Very often these notions are misused. There's confusion, but that's not good. As a result of the confusion, there is a situation that as to the information with limited access, a few is done, a few of legislation acts we have around special conditions to protect the transmission. We have understanding that that was a bank secret, and investigation, doctor's secret, and confession. But if we look at what we have on the level of legislation and protection of that information, that is only for a bank secret.
At the level of the state resources, the situation is more tragic even because we have such a notion of the general public information resources, which include everything, including open information. There is a common understanding that any information which is not confidential is open, but the problem is that realistically there is something which is understood under this public information resources, which comprises whatever you may imagine, which actually funds or is possessed de facto by the state, including information which requires really high level of protection, like state secret and the, let's say, in-house information or proprietary information, by a big layer of open information. If speaking about any standards and norms regarding this protection, they provide only for the in-house information or the state secret. If we're talking about the bylaws, legislative, sub-legislative documents, they are protected like the in-house or proprietary information. In fact, we face the situation when a big amount of open information is available. What, for example, Denis was talking about, information about the situation in the roads or the road state of the roads. This will also be within the scope of the requirements regarding the general protection of information. If the information will be the disposal of Ministry of Transportation and Transport, in order to preserve that information, we have to create some data center, then we have to put the officer armed, let's say, guard to let's say to guard all these, and in order to get the comprehensive system for information protection. So there is a big political issue regarding whether we need, first of all, for the open information to spread the same regime of protection, which is definitely required for the information with the, let's say, confidential information like the state secret or proprietary information. Regarding the restricted access information, can be of different categories. In fact, for example, when the public body, and by this the public or state-run company, because according to the public resources also includes the information which is processed by the companies which belong to the state or state-run companies. So the issue arises regarding confidential information. For example, the natural person can give this information to be processed to the public body of the state-run enterprise. That's it. This is going to be a state-run information resource. And again, to keep this information, we have to create the comprehensive, let's say, structure of protection of this information according to our laws. And this is specifically resolved by the State Committee on the Communication. There are some other rules which regulate the system of comprehensive protection of information, but they were introduced rather long time ago, and they are not, they can be used for the cloud technologies. As a result, we have the situation when, in fact, the public bodies, even if we are talking about the open information, the amount of which increases year in, year out, for example, about the state of the roads and the jams on the roads, traffic jams, they have to create, by all means, the data centers in order to keep, preserve, and process this information. The problem is like that the state, in fact, doesn't have any funds for that, any money for that, and nothing is being done. In order to do that in compliance with the law, we have to overcome a very big problematic procedure, and when we go through this procedure, we'll be able to use it maximum 10 or 15% of the capacity of these data centers, and we do not need that. Also, there is a very good norm in the legislation which says that in order to process the personal data which sit or which are possessed by a public body, those data can be processed exclusively by the state company which is subordinate to this public body. For example, the inform policy, well, let's say agriculture policy, to preserve the information about the milking amount of the milk from the cows. They do not have to meet the requirements which exist today. For example, we would like to have the same data center which they will share with the Minister of Education. They cannot do that, So we are talking about a situation when there were no clouds and there was not so much open information in place. So the question arises whether maybe we should introduce differentiated approach to protect, first of all, the open information which belongs to the state information resources, maybe partially facilitate the procedure of protection for the restricted information. Of course, this does not apply to the state secret or the in-house or proprietary information, and by doing this, to open the road for the open information, if we're talking about cloud technologies, which will allow us to embark on the road of which was described by Dmytro Shymkiv, the road chosen by almost all the European countries. And the USA, they have even cloud strategy. And this strategy, when they say that the priority is given in case of the state procurement, the preference is given to the priority who plans to use the cloud technology. So this is a very fashionable topic, which is within the scope of interest of many countries in the globe of ours. So the question arises, shouldn't we introduce less, powerful information pools, which will be part of the public resources? In the draft law from the norm creating point of view. If you're talking about the cloud computing definition, the definition per se is more or less translation of the definition provided by NIST, American Institute of Standardization and Technologies, which is one of the most authoritative bodies in this sphere regarding the standards, first of all. Well, this is emphasized, also they emphasize that the cloud computing presupposes the pool which can be used, and they propose to introduce a definition of the cloud service provider access, what Valeriy was talking about, because now the subject legislative documents or bylaws which insist they describe the requirements to the owner and these peculiar features of cloud technologies that this center can be, we can use several data centers which can belong to several legal entities. So in principle, being tied up to the owner not always can be a correct one in order to allow it to introduce the respective technology. So this is just at the level of definitions. If you take in consideration the principles which are included in this draft law, they propose to install the simplified procedure of processing of certain kinds of information, which belong, first of all, to the public information resources created using the cloud technologies. Again, I would like to emphasize that, first of all, it's being done, and the emphasis is put on open or placed on the open information processed by the bodies of the state power and the state-run companies. As for the confidential secret information, which is not the state secret, actually the public the public information should not be classified into the state secret. But, actually, they can have their own information which they believe to be confidential, but this should be decided by the companies themselves. And the situation could be when the information became confidential. It was the possession of a private person, but somehow they were given for the processing by a state-run company or the public entity. So maybe this public entity will possess some kind of confidential information. As for the secret information, which is not a state secret, I repeat myself, nobody claims to violate the state secret or, let's say, the proprietary information, but in addition to the saving of the budgetary funds and innovation aspect, it also can liberate, or let's say, to find some of the funds to protect the information, which really requires some protection under the situation available today in this country. Which doesn't, the open information does not require this level of protection as the proprietary or confidential the state secret. If we are talking about the processing of this information and by the public information resources, they can concentrate on the information which really requires protection without putting too much effort in protection of information about how much milk from this or another cow or whatever else, something like that. I mentioned already that the draft law does not change the existing requirements regarding the protection of state secrets or the proprietary information, confidential information. And naturally, under the situations when there is some sectoral legislation, for example, to protect the bank secret, this draft law will not touch upon such things. They are going to introduce the general provision that theoretically or technically we can process this kind of secret information in the cloud, but if the regulator of the respective sector introduce some more strict conditions or special conditions, then definitely on the sectoral level they are going to use this special legislation. In other words, nobody claims to take the authorities of the National Bank, and today at the level of the National Bank already they have the exception to the rule, because the National Bank accepted as their sectoral standard, already accepted the international modern standards for protection of information, actually to copy these ISO 2021, bypassing the system in the country. So, speaking in principle, there are precedents like that. Why so? Because they had to work with the SWIFT system. If they want to go on some international level, they had to adapt themselves somehow, to adjust themselves. What they plan to do in naturally, nobody claims so far at this stage. We are not. The draft law doesn't say anything about the cancellation of comprehensive system of protection of information, but the provision is made for introduction of the simplified procedure for processing of the open information and confidential information and the secret information, but not the state secret, in the system of cloud computing. So the draft law makes provision for a simplified procedure, which, for example, in order to get the expertise opinion regarding the comprehensive system of protection information, which makes provision for several levels of confirmation of the level of expertise of several of the general system and some of the components. Draft law in the part which is related to cloud computing makes provision for the simplified procedure of computing if in the cloud computing system will have the certificate, or let's say will meet the requirements of the international requirements in this sphere, which will be issued, the certificate by the national bodies, plus the contract must contain several commitments of service providers, on the part of service providers. Like Denis said, that this is absolutely normal practice when the specific commitments or obligations which is going to be done with information, this should be by all means undertaken by the service provider. If we meet all those requirements, if you'll see A, that our provider undertook to ensure accessibility over a certain period of time, and on the level of the sub-legislation, the cabinet of ministers is going to determine what level those commitments must be undertaken by the service provider, because this is really important. Plus, if this is confirmed, if we have a confirmation the provider really can do that, it must be confirmed by the certificate. Or if you are talking about the national standards in the sphere of protection of information or international standards, this will be regarded as a grounds, roughly speaking, will be grounds to introduce simplified procedure for comprehensive information protection system. So they will have to check less. They will rely upon the fact that there is a certificate. We're not going to verify this. We accept what it is and then see whatever else exists. So, in essence, this is a major principle underlying this draft law. Plus, also they suggest they propose to introduce the changes regarding the protection of personal data, specifically in the administrative level. So they are not talking to touch the protection of personal data based on the EU directive. So nobody is going to do anything with that. Maybe they have been poorly translated, but they are more or less modern, but they propose in the draft law to introduce the following. The data which are possessed by the state bodies, they can be, the person who can process this may be only exclusively the public enterprise or company which is subordinate to this public body, because this doesn't allow at least to create data centers will be shared by not by one, by two ministries, or to introduce or to involve private resources, because if there are some big problems, this will lead to the situation where nothing will be done. So the roads of private initiatives will be taken care of by Ukrainian or the global players. We'll see what happens, but first of all, we are talking about the Ukraine data center, who will be the player here. Well, this is very briefly about the major principles which underlie this draft law. And summing up, speaking about the possibility of introduction of the cloud, computing and cloud technologies in the sphere of protection of information, introduction of concept cloud service provider who provides the access to the cloud computing system, and simplified procedure of actually carrying the expertise when creating the comprehensive information protection. And once again, and continue what has been said by Dmytro Shymkiv. So why, in addition to innovation, why the cloud technology is so popular the world over? Because this makes it possible to say, the implication of the cloud technology spells the saving of the state budget funds, like as Valeriy mentioned. In fact, it's what we are living through. Each the state body has their own, let's say, power station in their basement. And that's what is happening with the IT system at the level of the national agents and bodies. And we can see that if you're talking about the cars of 1998, 99, the use of the cloud technologies, for example. How we can use defined customers, let's say subtle customers, even using the old machine, taking into consideration the computing take place not at the level of compute PCs, but at the level of cloud. That means that it depends how long this machine can operate. And the public bodies in other countries which are decision makers regarding the switch over to the cloud technologies, they are guided, first of all, not by the idea that this is very nice and innovative, but they just want to save the state or public money. And while I've been reminded my time is up.
I believe there will be many questions during discussions. So get back the slide which shows what was in the past, what will be in the future, and maybe our main speakers have some comments on how you see this draft. 30 seconds, I will say a few words. I remember this story. That's like going back into the history. A few years ago, when we were launching the governmental portal, one of the experts in the spheres of information security said, he said, from the point of view of information security, you should have better not launch this website, then it will be fine for us. That's economic absurdity. We have this issue of direct foreign people think about protection, about defense, but there are three verbs, and these are the words that people next to NATO, who are close to NATO, say. First word is regulate, but that's not enough. To create the national comprehensive system of cyber security in the country. The next word is facilitate, which means assist. And third word is collaborate, interact. So the bodies which are responsible for information, cyber security in Europe, they are being transformed so that they correspond to these three verbs. We regulate, it's not like we regulate and you execute. Now the time changes and the approaches change. Where's collaborate, where's facilitate? The society, the governmental bodies are to be involved into that. Under the influence of that draft, we would like to see it as a law. It will be important to change the culture, the managerial style. We will, of course, have to consider all these things because the progress together with them is possible. As we have mentioned in the beginning, when during the registration we offered you to say what you are interested in, so people who are mostly organized, they will have a priority word